Every human being arrives not as a blank slate, but as an ancient hardware, ready to receive software of a specific time and place. This first environment, this cradle, is an unrequested inheritance delivered with the first breath. And it's our own family who delivers this inheritance. They teach us what they were taught in a chain of programming that spans generations. With well meaning dedication, they hammer into us a religion, a nationality, a social class. They make us feel pride or anger that is not our own, as if being born in a certain place or being forced into a faith were a personal achievement or a conscience choice. It is a structure built on borrowed foundations. At its core, false. Let us backtrack. First and foremost, we are humans. That is it. That is all. That is the only truth. The coordinates of our birth quietly determine our symbols, beliefs, alliances, and the invisible rules of where we belong. Long before a choice is even possible, we are drafted into a family story, carrying forward victories, wounds, and unspoken loyalties we did not consciously choose. Soon after, a quieter force goes to work. A hammer, made not of blows, but of repetition. Millions and millions of small, relentless taps formed by language, storybooks, praise, correction, familial approval. These taps shape the idea of us and them, of right and wrong, of acceptable and forbidden. This invisible curriculum teaches a subtle but powerful illusion that the map is the territory, that the names given to things are the things themselves. Neuroscience reflects this process through synaptic pruning. As frequently used, neural pathways are reinforced and others are trimmed away, slowly shaping the architecture of our perception. This condition is not a conspiracy, it is a survival mechanism for the tribe, passed from parent to child, often with love, but without awareness. The difficulty begins when we forget that a teaching ever occurred and mistake local rules for universal law. Awakening begins not with rebellion, but with recognition, the realization that a program is running, that the walls of reality are made of story, and that stories, once seen clearly, can be rewritten. At some point, reflection becomes unavoidable. The mirror appears as humanity's first intimate teacher, revealing not only what is seen, but the one who sees. Across cultures, mirrors were treated as sacred interfaces, eyes of the soul, capable of perceiving beyond surface appearance. In contemplative traditions, the mirror represents the nature of mind itself, empty, yet capable of reflecting all life without being stained but by what passes through it. When you look into a mirror, there is a subtle delay between movement and reflection, a fraction of a second that hints at a space between you and the image you call me, I, ego. You are not the face in the glass. You are the watcher, the center of awareness observing from just behind the eyes. That reflection is an avatar. It is our vehicle in this world, and we are responsible for its maintenance. But we must always remember, the vehicle does not experience the journey. I do. The I am that I am. The confusion begins when the vehicle, the ego, believes it is the driver. It is the ultimate driverless car, programmed by the cradle and hammer, operating on old maps until the true passenger awakens and takes the wheel. Reality, in its own way, is screaming at us to wake up. Yet, we must humble ourselves in quiet awareness, for waking up is not for everybody in the same moment, for whatever reason, as much as I would wish it was. We must all go through our learning steps. I too am still learning, with no certainty of what comes next. Staying humble is key. My role is to unlearn, to relearn, and to pass on what I see, letting it fall where it may. And if we are fortunate, we may learn from those before us, scraping our knees a little less, honoring the wisdom of learning from the stumbles of others as well as my own. The reflection is information. The watcher is experience. From birth, we are handed pre-drawn maps, dogmas, doctrines, national myth, presented as a final truth. But there is no final truth. The truth is alive and breathing, evolving like everything else around us. Yet, the raw territory of being alive is far more fluid and untamed than any map can contain. The journey of awakening begins with the courage to admit that the map is not the land, that the willingness to step into the uncharted territory of one's own direct experience. Left unattended, the mind does not remain empty. Seeds arrive constantly. Headlines, memories, emotional residues, cultural expectations, they land, sprout, and intertwine. For much of life, we live as the product of this unconscious cultivation. Before planting anything new, there is value in pausing to examine what is already growing, a soil audit, if you will. Not an act of judgment, but of curiosity and compassion. Within this inner landscape, what we call weeds are often signals rather than enemies. Ancients over planning may appear when life feels rigid or unsafe, a subconscious attempt to create control. Defensive cynicism may grow in places where trust was broken, forming a protective layer of fertile ground. Constant distraction may spread where silence feels threatening, covering a fear of meeting oneself without noise. The gardener's law is simple. What you nurture grows. What you starve weakens. Transformation does not require violent removal, but conscious replacement. Attention redirected. Ritual replacing anxiety. Purposeful engagement dissolving distraction. Over time, the garden responds. The past is not meant to be deleted. It is meant to be composted. When painful experiences are ignored or sealed away, they ferment beneath the surface, creating vigilance and tension in the nervous system. Composting is the living practice of bringing gentle, curious attention to old fear, asking what the environment demands of us, and what strength or wisdom emerged as a result. Awakening is rarely gentle. It is often forged through friction. Pain, limitation, injustice arrives uninvited, yet they function as powerful teachers. Will is tempered in resistance, slowly rubbing away what is false or fragile. Authenticity is often discovered through the exhaustion of wearing a mask that never truly fit. In alchemy, there is a stage of blackening, a necessary dissolution before transformation can occur. Identity loosens, certainty collapses. Like biological systems, strengthens through measured stress. The soul grows not despite challenge, but because the challenge signals that more capacity is required. Relationships then become another mirror. Other people are not separate from the inner process. They reflect back what is active within us. What we admire points toward latent potential. What triggers a visceral reaction often reveals an unhealed wound seeking attention. Projection operates quietly. Disowned aspects of the self are assigned outward. The arrogance that enrages may reflect a part of ourself that was once shamed for being too visible, too expressive, too much. Forgiveness is not excusing behavior. It is releasing ourselves from the same contracted frequency we imprison others within, a clearing of the inner mirror. In the modern world, that mirror is often held by external forces. Algorithms anticipate fears and cravings. Tribes reflect expectations of who we should be. Opponents project caricatures designed to provoke reaction. Reclaiming sovereignty means taking ownership of the mirror again, sourcing reflection from within. Identity, upon closer inspection, is not a statue moving through time. It's a river, a process, not a noun but a verb. What we call I is a temporary gathering of sensations, memories, and perceptions. When we loosen our grip on a fixed story of self, change no longer feels like attack, but like movement, shifting. We wear masks to survive, roles designed to project competence, reliability, or belonging. The danger arises when we confuse a mask for the actor. When vulnerable or playful parts are pushed into shadow, integration begins when we recognize ourselves as the one capable of many roles, rather than the role itself. Emotions too are temporary visitors, weather systems passing over the open sky of awareness. The practice is not to control the storm, but to rest as the sky. We can apply the Kybalion's wisdom of rising above the plane of duality here. We observe the pendulum swing of heavy emotion, the anger, the grief, the fear, without swinging with it. We see its motion, acknowledge its presence, but remain anchored in the still center. This requires a shift of our inner gardening. We have learned to instantly cut a weed by naming it and consciously diffusing it, untangling from it. But sometimes it's better to let it grow a little, to allow its roots to aerate the soil and let some upward growth appear before we chop and drop back to mulch. During this pause, we ask it, why are you here? What does the soil of my life lack that called for this thought, this feeling or emotion? What can I replace you with that we can both benefit from? The goal is not war, but balance. A garden where every element, even the messenger weed, can teach us something. After all, these patterns have a right to grow freely elsewhere, but in our garden, in our sovereign space, we have a responsibility to cultivate. And unless a fellow gardener asks for our help, we must not force our will or guidance upon their plot. We simply stand by, tending our own, sharing only when asked. From this place of observed stillness, choice then takes on its true weight. Free will is not endless possibility, but profound responsibility. Every decision sends ripples beyond what can be immediately seen. The question shifts from what do I want to what does this choice create? How am I affecting the ripples of time and space? We become conscious participants in shaping reality. From this participation, ethics emerges not as rigid rules, but as operating principles for systemic health. Compassion is not passive softness, but intelligent, fierce care for the long arc of the whole spiral. Sometimes this means allowing necessary friction of a difficult truth to prevent a greater, quieter harm. Wisdom, therefore, also learns the discipline of non-interference. Shielding others from the organic consequences of their choices robs them of the very friction needed to forge their own wisdom and strength. Detached love means holding a compassionate space for another's journey without mistakenly taking on their karma. We water our own garden and trust them to tend to theirs. Beyond the personal intuition begins to feel like movement from deeper dimension, like a shadow responding to a source just out of view. Trust becomes alignment with that subtle motion. Intention and action become messages sent upward and downward all at once. When foundational intention shifts from fear to trust, life often responds with coherence. More flow, fewer collision. The mirror reflects differently because the source has changed. The most powerful teaching then becomes example, not instruction, but embodiment. A foothold formed in the cliff face of existence, the path made real by walking on it. From a wider view, existence resembles a spiral rather than a straight line. Mistakes reveal themselves as learning curves, darkness as contraction rather than evil. From this vantage point, urgency softens into participation. Humanity appears as a single living body, individuals as conscious cells. Others are not outsiders, but fellow systems performing different functions: creativity, defense, repair. The sense of I widens into we and eventually into us. In a unified field, the health of the part and the health of the whole are the same. Every small choice becomes a vote for the future that continues. Loving another as oneself stops being moral instruction and becomes simple recognition. Between stimulus and response, there is always a space, a quiet gap where choice lives. Resting there, even briefly, allows action to arise from stillness and words from silence. The mirror no longer merely reflects, it generates. Presence alchemizes chaos into clarity, pain into meaning. Light begins to originate rather than bounce. The end of one cycle is always the beginning of another. You step forward not as a programmed passenger, but as a conscious navigator. The journey does not conclude. It unfolds as a series of beginnings. And so the question remains, gently and continuously, why now? What is this moment showing us? And how will we choose to meet this moment?